Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. This is the weekly SMB Nation webinar. This is part of the fall semester. We'll get to that in a moment. Today's SharePoint, a little bit of housekeeping up front. If you could please use the questions feature in your control panel to ask your questions. We'll have plenty of time to do it. We have a big audience today. The topic is SharePoint. That's a little bit new to our community, so I suspect there'll be a fair amount of questions. I'm coming to you live today from the Continuum Navigate conference in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan. And what's interesting is on the Continuum front, a shout out, about 1,000 attendees, a really robust conference, and an emphasis on security. Security as a service is one of the takeaways that I got out of this. I will be blogging all that in the next couple of days, but probably more relevant to world events would be of course, the tragedy that befell Las Vegas on late Sunday night. I have a couple of reports up on the site, so feel free to go to smbnation.com and look under analysis, and you'll see two reports from Las Vegas. One that I did this morning ends with something that I think is pretty important. You know, above and beyond the grief and condolences and your thoughts and prayers would be, I'm recommending come to Las Vegas. You know, let's make sure that this town is supported in a very easy way that we can do it, and that would be come to a conference in Las Vegas, come here on vacation, spend some money. I talk about that in today's report in the final paragraph, but that's something simple you can do, and I guess my feeling is being here on the ground, and, you know, subject to the emotions and the impact and all that, I just want to make sure that Las Vegas doesn't somehow fall out of favor with technology companies doing conferences and so on. With that said, we have 2 more weeks after today, the fall semester. So we'll be back next Wednesday and the Wednesday thereafter. Next week I'll be in Austin at Spice World, the Spice World Conference by Spiceworks, and I'm going to stay over a couple days for Austin City Limits. So let me know if any of you are there and you want to get together for barbecue and music. And then later in the fall, I'll be at the Channel Pro event November 2nd in New Jersey. And then a couple of other conferences that I can't quite announce quite yet in terms of my commitment. With that said, Amie, I appreciate you joining us today to talk about, again, a relatively new topic for our audience to dig into with SharePoint. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, and let's get right into the good stuff, and maybe I'll interrupt you with questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Harry, and I'm really excited as well, and I'm glad to be invited to speak at SMB Nation, so thank you very much. So just a brief overview of who I am. I have a SharePoint consulting company. Oh, next slide. There we go. I have a SharePoint consulting company, and it's called Seisay IT Solutions. So I'm CEO and founder, and we specialize in literally all things related to SharePoint. So, of course, the more important piece, before you even start using SharePoint, should be the strategic planning pieces. And those are some of the topics that we're going to cover today is different approaches for how we can use SharePoint. And of course, maintaining server farm environments on-premise or maintaining SharePoint sites inside of Office 365. And we're going to talk also about if SharePoint doesn't quite do what you need to accomplish out of the box, then we could definitely use some custom code development to really push the envelope of what SharePoint can do. And of course, alongside of custom code development comes branding to make SharePoint not look like SharePoint, because sometimes people want to really customize the user experience. And so finally, after you've implemented SharePoint, I have a number of different ways in which we implement training to really drive in user adoption. And we'll talk about training and some of the different approaches you can take to really make sure that the SharePoint implementation is successful. And so we have a number of different strategies that we focus on for different clients, because every client, every industry is different. From small, medium, and large, you're going to have different experiences, and you can't come with a one-size-fits-all approach for how you're going to roll out SharePoint. So we're going to talk about some different strategies on, you know, what is SharePoint, how do you use it, and how can we be more efficient with using SharePoint. All right, so and definitely feel free to have me pause and ask questions along the way. I certainly am open to having a discussion, so feel free to ask me questions as you see fit. And so first and foremost, before we just kind of dive into SharePoint, and I know I talked a little bit about our services, so sometimes the struggles, and we'll talk about some of the different struggles with SharePoint, is that it gets a bad rap. And we'll talk about some of the different things that I have noticed and experienced. And so we try to make sure that we solve those business problems that a company might be experiencing, whether it's how they just work on a regular basis, or if they're having issues with their SharePoint implementation. We want to make sure that our clients and our partners are going to receive the most business value out of their SharePoint investment, because we really, really, really enjoy using SharePoint, and it's a great tool. There's so many different ways that you can use it if you really understand the value that comes out of SharePoint. So just talking a little bit about the way that some organizations function, right? So sometimes people are emailing around a bunch of different documents, and sometimes people are digging through emails to find information that they're looking for. So there was this one scenario where I was a part of a team, and there were about 50 people that needed to update an Excel spreadsheet. So just think through that process for a minute. So if I send an email to someone and I attach, or to 50 people, let's stick with the 50 people reference. If I send an email to 50 people and I need them to provide some kind of information in this Excel spreadsheet, so I have to send out this email as an attachment. So the first person saves the attachment, makes their update to the Excel spreadsheet, saves it back to their machine, hits reply all, attach that email, send, and by the time the 10th person does the same thing, they probably got the 5th person's reply all attached email changes. And so when you think about that entire process of all these emails flying around, which document is the latest document, you have to then think about, well, what does that whole process look like for the person who sent out that initial email that has to then condense and consolidate all of these different changes? So instead of doing that, you could, of course, have a SharePoint site where all your documents are stored. You send people the link to the document. They update the document, and they're done. And so that, of course, sounds like a much faster, easier approach. SharePoint can keep track of all of the changes to that document, and you don't have to do extra work to try to consolidate all these different changes with the different documents. And of course, if your company has retention policies and you remembered, oh, you last emailed yourself a change to a document, well, if that retention policy is maybe 90 days, you can't recover a previous email. So then what do? Your changes are gone, right? Similarly to saving documents on file shares. So if you save your document on a file share, then if someone else has the ability to make changes to their document, they thought they were going to be very helpful and help you clean up this document, and you're on a tight deadline, and they decide, oh, we don't need this entire paragraph, right? And it's 2 o'clock, and your deadline is approaching, and you really needed that paragraph that your lovely coworker decided that you guys didn't need anymore. What do you do, right? So with SharePoint, if you're using the versioning features, SharePoint can keep track of every single last version of that document if you needed to. You can decide to have that document checked out to you so that you have exclusive editing capabilities of that document as well. You can also take that document a step further and decide that, well, I need for 5 different people to maybe approve this document before it's released to everyone to see, then you can maybe create a workflow, or you can just turn on content approval And you could decide to allow the document to get routed for different approvals, and you can also keep track of exactly where that document is in that process. You don't have to call someone and say, hey, did you approve that document? You can actually go to SharePoint and see whether or not the document has been approved or not. So those are some of the small pieces of the larger puzzle of the different things that you can do with SharePoint that is much more efficient than those two topics we just talked about. But when you think about the larger scale of how you could use SharePoint, think about a large company with maybe 10 different offices across the entire world. How are people going to share information? Are you going to have to keep emailing them, asking them for information? Or do you, when you take vacation, have to constantly check your email because you know someone's going to call or email you asking you for information versus storing the document in a central repository so that everyone has access to it and people can self-serve themselves and find the information so that you can focus on getting your work done or enjoying your vacation. And so you definitely, not just want to tie in the, intranet portal solutions, but you can definitely decide to create those mission-critical processes inside of SharePoint as well, such as a popular one is like an expense reimbursement. I've seen different proposal processes happening inside of SharePoint sites with all the documents that are required for proposal processes. It was a really cool solution that I supported with telework scheduling. So the process could be very simple. It could be that an employee submits their telework request. The telework request then goes over to maybe the manager for approval. And then after it's approved by the manager, it goes off to another person that does the scheduling perhaps. So you could do a lot of things with SharePoint. You can do color-coded calendars and requests for like leave requests and time off. Maybe people have flex schedules. Maybe people work from home. So if you are, of course, working in an office building with about 10 floors, if you call the person and they're not there in the office, do you then walk down to their office and realize, oh, wait, they're actually not here this week, versus let me look on the SharePoint site to see what their availability looks like. So you have a number of different options for how you can implement SharePoint solutions. Of course, say, for example, if you're inside of Office 365, you can much more easily do external sharing, because maybe you have some customers that have access to certain content. Then you could decide to share information with people outside of your organization much more easily. And you could, of course, have surveys. You could do things like, I always love having training sites. So I love having a training resource site with all the information for training. It could be the course evaluations, the attendees list, who attended training. Let's take a look at some of the stats on, well, did people sign up and they didn't come to training? Let's figure out how we can get people to actually commit to training maybe, or are people even attending training, right? So if you have a consolidated place where people can find all the training resources, it's going to be helpful for the people that's coordinating training. It's going to be helpful for people that want to take training because they know to go to the training site, look at the calendar of events, maybe look at some quick reference cards and documentation for training. And of course, we can do things like, have a number of videos perhaps, if you wanted to show videos, because some people learn differently. So you can do a number of different things with your training resources site that you create. And so those are just talking about a number of different solutions that you could possibly build. What we're going to do...
Hey, Amy?
Yes.
Yeah, if you don't mind, a couple people are mentioning, and Jenny, if you could do a double check on this, a couple people are mentioning that your volume is low. I actually hear you loud and clear, but I just wanted to pass on that feedback if there's anything you can do to double check your volume, Amy. And to answer a couple people's questions, yes, this is being recorded, and you will receive a playback link in the thank you letter from Jenny. So if for some reason you need to go to the playback, the instant replay, that will be available. But Other than that, Amy, Amy, you know what? I was a little bit remiss. I want to thank our sponsors today. It's just been one of those weeks. Forgive me, but
No worries.
we certainly appreciate the support of Fortinet. We're going to hear from them at midpoint at 12:30, and then we also appreciate the support of Veeam, and we're going to hear from Veeam at 1 p.m. So, Amy, please continue. Thank you.
Sure. I hope this is better. Let me know if this is better.
Yep, sounds good to me. We'll get.
Okay.
We can count on the audience for feedback, though. God bless them.
I know. I want to make sure you guys can hear me, so I hope this is
well,
better.
Here we have Rusty Brown out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, saying much better. Thank you, Rusty.
Oh,
okay,
excellent.
Please continue.
Awesome.
Amy. All right.
Thank you. Okay, so the two different types of changes that we're going to talk about in this presentation, one involves how do people embrace using SharePoint and encouraging and motivating people to see the true business value that comes with SharePoint. And the other type of change that we're going to talk about is a solution or different types of solutions for change management. So we're going to talk first about the people-focused changes, and then we'll also take a look at some sample screenshots of different solutions that you can build inside of SharePoint that wraps around change management. So the people change relates to, of course, people being able to see, again, the true business value of why they're being asked to use SharePoint. So you can't simply just roll out SharePoint without clear goals and direction for how SharePoint is going to be used in the organization. And of course, if management hasn't really mapped out what the mission critical processes are going to be used inside of SharePoint, then it's going to be less likely that people are going to then come willingly to use SharePoint. So we have to, of course, take a look at the different business goals. And I always say start off small. So I say, and I see it happening, I would not say just roll out SharePoint and expect people to use it. Start small, see if you can embrace a couple of different groups or maybe small chunks of business processes and see how they embrace it and see if they can see the true value of how it's going to help them do their jobs better. And so going a step further into this, it's not always SharePoint's fault is the title of the slide, because I think that over and over again, I have heard people say, I hate SharePoint or I don't like using SharePoint. And usually that is because SharePoint was just rolled out with no clear vision, no clear plans on how the organization was going to use SharePoint, or people they can't relate to it and they can't connect to it because they don't understand what to do with SharePoint, because there's so much you can do with it. And of course, I've seen it happen where leadership someone decides, oh, we're just purchasing SharePoint without really planning strategically for why we're even using SharePoint, or is this replacing a system, or sometimes it's being used in conjunction with another system, and sometimes that other system wins. And so, of course, if there is no consistency on the communication plan to the company, then you're going to have a harder time with people really embracing it and using it. So, of course, some of the things that I've done was I like sitting down and talking to people about what is it that they do on a regular basis. And I try to understand how they work, and I try to figure out ways in which that I can make their jobs easier by using SharePoint. And sometimes there's certain aspects that might not fit. So it's not that I'm always trying to just push people and sell them on SharePoint. And I will say maybe SharePoint's not the best fit, but if I can clearly see a quick win for how we can make someone's job easier, then I'm going to tie that into the technical solution and really have the whole goal is to make sure that they have less work to do and not more work to do. So that is, of course, understanding what their pain points are, what their frustration might be. Sometimes it's very simple little things that you can do to make it easier for people to want to use SharePoint. And that goes back to those different solutions that we kind of talked about in the beginning, where you could do, again, the portal site, the proposal site, a project management site. Maybe you have different tasks that people have to enter in, and they are automatically notified that they have a task assigned to them. And you can see the different statuses of each person's task. And you don't have to then bug them for, well, what is your status update? It's right there in the SharePoint site. And of course, I always say that how well a SharePoint implementation goes depends on how it's embraced at the top. If you're telling people at the top, we're using SharePoint now, then you need to make sure that you are using it, you're encouraging your team to use it, and you're also allowing people the time to actually go to training. Sometimes I see that happening where they're now the SharePoint site owner and they have their real work to do, and they're saying, I don't have time to come to training because I wasn't given time or the support to go to training. Training is definitely key with SharePoint. If you don't have that training in place, again, people are going to get frustrated and they're not going to use it. So some of the things that I've kind of seen people do in an organization is, that maybe the chief is encouraging, and I'll say forcing, their directors and managers to use SharePoint. So instead of coming to the meeting and you haven't uploaded your information to the SharePoint site, we're going to make sure that the management team understands that they have to put their information in there. And once they understand that they need to put their information in there and it's a requirement, then they can, of course, trickle down to their team and make it a requirement as well. And you do have to push back. Like sometimes, people want to still fill out their form, like they want to print it out, write it on their form, put it on your desk. And you have to say, the process is, make sure your document is inside of SharePoint. That's the only way that I'm going to review it. So I know that probably sounds a little archaic, but I do see it all the time. And so taking a look at the other very important piece with how people embrace SharePoint, it has to include a governance plan in your SharePoint implementation. That governance plan has to clearly define why are we using SharePoint, what are we doing, and of course, the roles and responsibilities matrix is going to help people clearly understand what they can do. So if you have site owners, you have site champions, power users, what kind of ability are you going to allow them to do inside of SharePoint? Are you going to give people that you randomly assigned as site owners the ability to have full control access? And what comes with that responsibility? So I have seen where people are given full control access, and they create test sub site 1, test sub site 2, test sub site 50, and then you go to do a migration, and you're looking like, okay, why do I have all these test sub sites in here? Because the site owner didn't really, either they didn't know that what it meant to create subsites, or maybe they didn't have a place to actually play, right? So we're going to talk about the sandbox as well that you can create for your training and support model as well. And so you can, of course, determine, okay, maybe we're not going to recreate the same problems that we might have had in a previous SharePoint implementation, and your governance plan has to define what people can and can't do. And of course, we have to then tie in what do the metrics look like. So I'm actually a partner with a third-party tool, and they actually have a really cool feature where you can see who, like the user's activities, like who's actually using SharePoint, who's actually a very active user in SharePoint, and you can then make decisions. You could say, well, we have this one person who is a site owner, but they're not really using SharePoint, so maybe we'll reach out to them to see, do you need additional training? Do you need additional support? Let's figure out why you're not using SharePoint, or maybe we can decide to take a look at this other person's activity, and we could see that they're really using SharePoint. Let's see if they want to be a site owner. So that product is actually by Cardiolog Analytics. It really deep dives into metrics for SharePoint, does a really great job with helping to determine a lot of different aspects of the SharePoint implementation. And then let's talk, yes.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to connect a couple of dots here that our audience would, in terms of user adoption and that kind of thing, our audience would have been, had no problem with that in some of the later editions of Small Business Server where they had a prepackaged, I'm going to call it an intranet based on SharePoint, but it was called Company Web, and it had the help desk ticket, the calendar, the this, the that, and that really helped the user adoption because you're absolutely right. I mean, we can talk about Dynamics CRM, we can talk about anything, and A, if management doesn't use it, and B, if the users don't use it, why the heck are we here?
Right. Why are we spending money on it? Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Hey, and I'm kind of thinking, Amie, if you don't mind, I'm kind of thinking maybe it's time to cut over to we're at midpoint, or 12:30 midpoint, and if you want to cut over, and I believe we're going to watch a little NFL football, and then I'm going to talk to Veeam.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Amie.
All right, no problem.
Go ahead and throw up the poll question. And while we're doing that, Amie, are you a football fan? Do you follow the Washington Redskins out there, or what's your pleasure?
Redskins, just because my dad and my brothers are Redskins fans.
Well, there you go. We got our fingers crossed that Seattle's here. I don't know. We have good days and we have bad days. So, with that said, Amie, go ahead and go on mute for a second. We're going to have a chit chat with Fortinet. Farzad, are you there, my friend?
Hello, Harry. How's it going?
All right.
How's it going, everybody?
You're coming from, I'm assuming, the sunny Silicon Valley today.
Sunnyvale. Yep, Northern California. I'm coming to you live from Fortinet HQ.
Perfect.
Everybody's well across the globe.
Yeah. Let's talk for a couple minutes. So, sir, quickly, what's your role and what's your background? And then I have a couple questions about Fortinet.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, I am a national account manager for Fortinet. I also assist the channel organization efforts in Pacific Northwest for the time being. I'm taking on two responsibilities. So basically, as you may already know, Fortinet is a 100% channel company. We don't sell directly to anybody. We have partners across the globe, and we are the manufacturer. We have the fastest throughput in, compared to all of our competitors. So let's, we talk some business later. Let's ease into it.
I'm curious about, so an observation, and can you hear me okay? Let me start with that.
Yes.
I just want to make sure our volume is okay. Thank you.
And but you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, perfect. I'm trying to use my radio voice.
Yeah, that's a good one. When I was down at when I was down at the your HQ where you work down in the Silicon Valley back in mid-July after the Microsoft, I still call it the Worldwide Partner Conference. They call it Inspire, but I saw your wall of patents. Talk to us about that, because it's more than just frames and pictures. It's a real commitment.
Oh yes. So I'm glad you saw the wall, and let me just speak to that for a quick second. So as you know, our company is a through and through engineering company, founded by two engineers in the year 2000, Ken and Mike D, both brothers, immigrants. They started the company, and this is actually their second company. They sold the first one to Juniper. They weren't happy with the direction it was taking. So guess what? The hardworking people they are, they started a second company, and they started approaching this as a holistic view to security. Now, being engineering minded, they started rewarding people. We have around like 4,000 employees, and I'd say 40, maybe actually. I'd say maybe 90% are engineers. And so there's so all these engineers are encouraged to, do what they can to improve security, come up with new solutions every day. I mean, we have labs all over the globe. We have over 100 offices across the globe. We have multiple labs in different locations, different countries, in France, in Canada. And so the wall that you saw is, our engineers being hard at work, coming up with new solutions every day. So that we have over 2,000 patents. And the thing that you saw is just a fracture of that. And that's a huge wall.
Yeah, boy, howdy. Well, it looked good. Hey, quickly, and we're going to have you back next week, by the way, so we'll dig deeper into some of your technology. But for today's purposes, you guys are pretty proud about the way Gartner has been recognizing you in the UTM space. What's going on with your relationship with Gartner?
So, it's always good to be, recognized by third party people who respect Gartner. The information that comes out is based on, the information they get from the end users, and so basically we have been number one in terms of UTM throughout I think the past 5-6 years. So we've been number one according to Gartner, and just recently the Magic Quadrant, when it came to enterprise, we have become a leader in the industry. We've been saying that we are a leader, but getting that recognition from Gartner is also very, we're very appreciative.
No, absolutely. Well, we appreciate your support. It's what makes all this possible. You established yourself as a good community citizen for SMB Nation, and we're happy to help reintroduce you. I call it a reintroduction to the SMB Nation community for Fortinet. And we'll look forward to kind of digging a little bit deeper next week and the week after. But Farzad, thank you for your time. And
thank
Amie,
you, Harry, and SMB Nation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Amie, while you get ready to rock again, I'm going to go ahead and, for people that came in late, so this is the weekly webinar. It's week 4 of the fall semester. We're talking SharePoint. I'm coming to you live from the Continuum Navigate Conference in Las Vegas. And speaking of Las Vegas, I posted up a couple of articles about the situation down here over on smbnation.com under analysis for your reading pleasure. And final word I would have is one of the takeaways from the Navigate conference is, in fact, the emphasis on the security opportunity for consultants and MSPs. With that said, Amie, are you ready to rock and roll again?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. We'll take that.
All right.
Jenny, if we could kill the poll and go back to PowerPoint.
All right. So we're going to talk, of course, a little bit more about the training models that you can offer for your SharePoint implementation. So I really like, of course, having the instructor-led hands-on activities because it's going to, of course, talk about an overview of a number of different topics first, along with some business case scenarios, and then hands-on activities to really reinforce the materials that were learned. It could be topics on creating lists and libraries, permissions, workflows, and even designing sites. So, of course, you can be a business user. You don't have to know any code to create SharePoint sites, and that is the beauty of being able to use a tool like SharePoint because you don't have to worry about having code written in order to build out a SharePoint site. You certainly can, and I'll show you some examples on the different codes you can implement inside of SharePoint. And I really like, of course, also having workshops as well, because these can be like free form. People just come in and talk about a number of different things that they're trying to implement. Usually they've already gone to formal training and they're trying to figure out how to implement something. So those workshops can be free form, so people can bring their topics into sessions. And of course, learning plans might be, maybe you have a SharePoint administrator and they don't really know what it means to be a SharePoint administrator, and we can create, of course, like customized plans in order to make that person a successful SharePoint administrator. And the one-on-one coaching pieces could be maybe someone needs some help. Again, one-on-one assistance, we're building out a solution, and so we can definitely provide guidance in a number of different ways to get their project up and running if they want to be like the owners of that solution. So the support model is going to go hand in hand with the different pieces, the different issues, the complications that people have that are constantly coming through the help desk. You can definitely tie that back into a training so that people can not have to contact the help desk as much for different, for the same task that could be done and covered inside of training, such as how do you upload a document, create a list or library. And of course, there should always be a process in place for who should contact the help desk. So are you allowing just anyone who has a SharePoint issue contact the help desk? Sometimes that's the case for some organizations. Some larger organizations, so I've supported like 40,000 user organizations where they said, you know what, the team members need to communicate with the site owners, and then the site owners, if they need help, can contact the help desk. And that really just depends on what your help desk coverage looks like. So of course, if you have one person on the help desk, you have a large organization, you might need to streamline the process for how the requests come in. And of course, making sure that the organization trusts the knowledge of the help desk support as well. Because I have seen cases where people get discouraged if they're contacting the help desk and the help desk people can't help them. That is a huge issue. And guess what? People are going to find other methods of getting their work done or just not use SharePoint. So that's always key. And of course, making sure that people understand what the service level agreements are so that expectations are clearly defined for when they can receive, when tickets can be closed out as well. So let's talk a little bit more about, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the business solutions that we're going to look at as far as how we implement change management inside of SharePoint. So when we talk about change management, of course, if you think about the way that different departments communicate, especially throughout different offices, sometimes it can be a little interesting as to how support is handled with how changes are released to the company. So I was literally just having a conversation the other day. It was about event planning, nothing to do with technology. And we started talking about SharePoint for some reason, and she said, oh, I hate SharePoint. And she said, what happens, and this happens in a lot of cases, is that when people, again, it's about how they embrace SharePoint. When people don't embrace it and they don't get the support that they need, they're going to go out and they're going to purchase the technology that they want to use, and they're going to use Google Docs, right? They're going to use Slack or any, and I'm thinking of Slack in terms of now there's Teams, right, inside of Office 5. But they're going to go out and use the technologies they want to use. And if that is the case, now your IT support has to manage yet another system. And so change management is going to, of course, allow us to not be reactive, and it's going to allow us to be proactive and not have to constantly put out fires. And so when we talk about change management, of course, it's talking about how do we effectively deliver solutions to the organizations to try to eliminate the risk factors. And it's going to eliminate systems going down and being able to provide, again, the service level agreements and the top-notch level of support for different systems across the organization. And of course, documentation and leadership driving that process is going to be key as well. So of course, usually a change is defined by it's usually defined by production level changes. And of course, if you have an HR system and maybe the HR system isn't actually supporting it, maybe they have a vendor that supports their HR system, but HR still should be a part of that process, because if the HR system goes down, they're going to still rely on IT to make sure that they get assistance with that vendor to bring the process, that system back up. So we want to make sure that we don't have unreliable systems, unpredictable behavior going on, and of course changes can impact the user experience. So when you have your change management plan in place, you're definitely going to want to have a leadership team that's going to facilitate the meetings. They're usually called a change advisory board, a CAB for short. You're going to make sure that your CAB has the technology folks that are involved, but then of course also understand what the business needs are as far as like the HR, finance, accounting systems. And so the leadership team is going to be the people that are going to be approving those requests and making sure that enough information is captured so that if something does go wrong, we can, of course, figure out a way to resolve those issues quickly. So again, we have a number of different people that are involved. IT needs to be involved, the people that are doing integrations between different systems. And of course, if we have other people, the business people that need to be involved, that might be getting support from different vendors and consultants and contractors, they all need to be involved in the different changes that are happening. And I always suggest mapping out what that process looks like. This is a very simple process, you know, and when we think about this process, and you can use this type of approach for any type of business process you're trying to implement in SharePoint, you can map out, especially if you're trying to use workflows, like what is the process? People submit requests, emails go out, and then you can have your different scenarios on different types of conditions, and then what is the end result? So we did Fortinet, so that tells me I need to speed up my time a bit. And so let's talk about the different possible solutions in SharePoint. So we can have a very, very simple approach where all the requests are added to a SharePoint list, and a business user can create this list, and we can decide to sort and filter the data in a number of different ways using views. So we could take a look at the pending requests versus the approved requests, and then when we come to our meeting, we can have conversations around the different requests that have come through the system and what were the outcomes of those requests. And of course, you can have alerts set up. SharePoint comes with alerts to automatically notify people of different changes in a SharePoint site. Very, very simple. And this is just showing a visual. So literally, it's just a list. You create your different columns. These are the two different views that you can create. Very simple to implement. And of course, I like using alerts a lot because I want to be able to tailor whether or not I'm notified of new requests that come through, or maybe the changes that happen to existing requests. Did a request go from pending to approved, or requests are deleted? And you can really fine-tune the different types of changes did somebody make a change to a document maybe that I've last uploaded, or just all changes that occur. And you can say, SharePoint, I need you to send me a notification automatically as soon as that change happens, or just send me a daily summary or a weekly summary, and you can pick your day and times, and these drop-downs at the bottom will come available once you select these two different radio buttons, which is really nice. You can even go a step further. So you can decide to have a SharePoint list that stores all of your requests, but then you can also decide to use the client.object model. And the client.object model, I'm going to show you how I use JavaScript to retrieve information from that request list. And I also decided that I was going to use Office UI Fabric as well to style the content that comes out of SharePoint, and use workflows to send email notifications that are customized. So this, of course, involves code, right? So Office UI Fabric is available. Microsoft released their design patterns. These are the fonts and the color schemes that they use internally. They released it for other people to use with their apps and add-ins. They have responsive support as well. It's really nice. You can definitely check out the website here. You can see the different icons that they make available as well. And of course, when you talk about the client-side-object model, so I really like using the client-side-object model. You do have support for JavaScript. You do have data assemblies. You do have options for REST, Windows Phone assemblies. So I used to do the whole writing .NET applications, deploying solutions to the farm. I really got tired of that because I had to submit change requests, right? So I decided to use the client-side-object model because you're really only working with the site collection level, and you don't have to deploy solutions. And so with the client-side-object model, essentially what you're doing is you're tapping into the web service that Microsoft makes available using client.svc. You're actually going to, in JavaScript, reference xp.js, and that's going to broker the communication back to the server object model, which then is going to go to the content database to retrieve the data that you're trying to request, maybe in a list, and then the responses are then returned to the browser. And you can do some really nice things with CSOM. You can batch up your requests. So the difference between REST and CSOM is that REST is more chatty. So you're doing a request and response. But CSOM allows you to batch up requests, send it to the server, and just get your response back. And you have a number of different APIs available. I'm usually using the list libraries and, of course, groups, because I can do things like, well, just show me all the groups in the SharePoint site on one page versus me digging through different sites in the same site collection. So it's really nice. And this is a visual of looking at how you can tap into the client.svc web service by using either OData for your CRUD operations, or you can use, of course, CSOM to then retrieve information from that the web service. And this is a visual of how you can create your client context. So you're essentially saying, I need you to get me some information from SharePoint. You can build that request, and then you can actually build a number of different requests. That's why you see the .load functions here. And that's how you batch up all of your requests. And then you can execute that request, and of course, it's going to return the information back to your page. And then, of course, you can keep doing the cyclical process of build, execute, process, results. If you need to grab more information, such as give me the title of the website or give me this person's user's name once you request that user, the current user. Yes.
Yeah, hey, like I say, I want to add context as I'm able. And so what's interesting about these last couple of slides is our audience, they're pretty particular, and so they will often judge an event, a conference, a webinar by a very simple standard. Did I learned something I didn't know?
Okay, good.
And
is this fitting that standard?
It is.
Excellent.
And I suspect what's going to happen is beyond today, we can talk offline, but if you're agreeable to sharing your email address or some way to contact you, I suspect people will reach out to you in sort of the proverbial partner-to-partner fashion, because that's exactly where this aligns, right? Is we have people on the line today that could bump into opportunities and do a reach out and say, hey, Amie, can we team up on a gig, right?
Okay.
But please continue. No, I mean, it's meeting my standard of teaching me something. Right on.
Awesome. I love it. Excellent.
All right.
Thank you, Harry. Yep.
Go on.
Yeah. So let's look at the custom code development sample. So this is a custom developed solution inside of Office 365. I show how I kind of formatted the calendar a little bit of all of the different requests. And I always make sure I put my flow chart of my change management process right on the home page so people know how to find it, and different guidelines, because people are going to always ask, like, what is the process again, and what do I need to do to submit my request? And so when you look at the requests that come in, so what I do, and again, this is the client-side object model using Office UI Fabric, so it doesn't look, this piece here at the bottom doesn't look like SharePoint, right? So you can literally click on these approve links here, and they'll automatically turn from red to green, and the page does not refresh either. And you can click on these different links to edit or view the request that came through. And so when you're creating a new request, again, doesn't look like the regular SharePoint form, you can really customize the way that the form looks. You can have drop downs and radio buttons. I had another request for, they wanted like an autocomplete feature where you start typing and it'll give you some suggestions. So you have options to choose from. I have these little buttons here at the bottom, let you add or cancel. And these are what the custom emails look like. So this is just kind of showing you that you can have images and you can really control the way that the emails look. If you want to have a link to hit the approve reject option that comes in for maybe your emergency request to the change advisory board. And so before I go into Veeam, I think we have a couple more minutes. So this is just showing how you can create a simple SharePoint site with some code. And there could be a number of different contexts for how you create your change management process. I supported other change management processes where they had sponsors that would add different projects, and then the email notification will go out to all the business areas, and the business areas can then come in and specify whether or not they have an impact or not, and everything was security controlled. And so if you don't have access to this certain business area, you're not going to be able to make any changes. And we show and hide different buttons on the page as well, according to the business area that the person's in. So you can really customize the experience. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really just depends on what the business needs are. So with that, I'll hand it over to Veeam. Unless someone has any questions, or I guess we'll wait until after Veeam, and then we'll get questions. Yeah,
exactly, folks. If you could marshal your questions using the questions feature in your control panel. Amie, while you're queuing up the video, folks, the sound does come over the computer speakers, and we appreciate Veeam's support. Amie had a question from somebody that asked, why Fortinet, why Veeam? And folks, here's a reality is, think of us as public radio or public TV. We're bringing you real content, real academic storytelling, and we rely on the generous support of our sponsors to make it happen. I'd like to say the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other foundations. That's not quite the realm, but in this case, it's Veeam, and earlier it was Fortinet. So let's jump right into it, Amie.
Okay. Let's see. So this video cannot be played on my device, which is odd. But it looks like a red icon. Is that a YouTube link that perhaps I could pull it up in my browser?
Could be. Jenny, are you available over in the radio control room on this one? Otherwise, we can do it a little bit at the end of the webinar. Custom coding.
So custom code is not required. So the screenshots here, let me go back here. The screenshots here show no code at all. And that is an important question because sometimes a company might decide not to use any custom code in SharePoint because they don't have the resources internally to support it. So you don't have to write code. This is a out-of-the-box solution. And it works well if it suits your needs. So you don't have to have code if you don't want to have code in your SharePoint environment.
Okie dokie, and Amie, right now I'm only seeing the splash screen. I'm not seeing the PowerPoint presentation, if so noted.
Okay.
And folks, if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask them now, or forever hold your peace. While they're marshaling their questions, Amie, let's give it the old college try on the video. See if we can knock it out of knock it out.
Yeah, it is not showing up on my device.
Yeah,
it can't play it. Okay.
That's fine. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just do a double check on the questions. The coast may be clear. We can get everybody back to work, filling time and what have you. So I think we're clear. Amie, I appreciate your time today. Let me start to wrap it up. So first of all, thanks for bringing a new topic. Actually, you know, it's a little wonky. It's a new old topic, if that makes sense. And folks, you need to be looking at SharePoint, you know, and that's going to integrate with some of the other Office 365 components. That's for another day. Next week we're back, so we have 2 more weeks of the fall semester, and so join us next week, as well as I'll be down in Austin. It's Spice World, that's underwritten by SpiceWorks, and then you can count on seeing me at Channel Pro in New Jersey on November 2nd. And Jenny just texted me, Amie, that we're going to get that Veeam video link to everybody as part of our thank you letter, along with the replay link for the webinar today. Some resources from Fortinet. Amie, we took some time out of your day. Literally, the rehearsal, the delivery. I owe you a cup of coffee next time you're out in Seattle visiting Redmond. Okay, it's on me.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you guys having me.
Absolutely.
Harriet,
all right.
We have one more question.
Oh, okay, Jenny, could you go ahead and go ahead and ask it, please?
If I was looking for a company or person to do SharePoint custom coding of the type you were showing us, how would I find such a resource?
So, of course, I'm going to shamelessly plug my company. We do SharePoint development work, but if you're looking for a person, if you want to hire SharePoint people, I would go to there's like the SharePoint user groups. So it depends on the city that you're in. There are usually SharePoint user groups in major cities. And so there's also SharePoint Saturdays on the spsevents.com website, where you can kind of see who's actively involved in the community, because people who are going to spend their evenings, that are going to spend their weekends, their whole Saturday talking about SharePoint, are probably going to be very passionate about SharePoint. So if you also want to send me an email and you're looking for a person, you're looking for some ideas, or other companies that you might want to look at, just let me know, and I'll send you some additional information. And I can also send information out on like the user groups. I know that in DC we have Ruston. There's SharePoint user group of DC. There's the Federal SharePoint user group. There's the Women in SharePoint. There's some Office 365 user groups. So I hope that answers your question.
Good Lord. Yeah, and I want to add to that. So the SharePoint Saturday, folks, I did forget that. I think it's October, I'm not in front of a calendar, 25th, 26th in Redmond. It's been slightly rebranded to be Office 365 Saturday, but it kind of originates from SharePoint Saturday. And Amie, what I found as I was researching that event, which I will be at, what I found was it was very interesting that like they have 4 simultaneous SharePoint Saturdays that weekend. I mean, it was unreal, like Milan and Beirut and Seattle, and I'm like, shit, this is the real deal, man.
Yes, it's true. Like, it's all over the world. And I was literally this morning thinking about whether or not I was going to go back to Ottawa at the end of this month, because usually I go to Ottawa. And we are, like, there's a pack of people that travel to these different cities speaking and presenting. I'm usually a speaker, too. I've slowed down this year, but we love it. We are a family. Like, we really do get along really well. We have a great time talking about SharePoint. So that passion is what you would want to look for in a person, because then they're going to really do their job well.
Yeah, and I saw it at SharePoint Fest in Seattle in early August. I did attend that, and it was again, my compliments. If I had to guess, a few hundred users, but it was real. Hey, Jenny, back to you. Do we have any more questions queued up?
None at this time.
Okay. Well, folks, once again, thanks for taking time out of your busy day, your busy week to join us. Coming to you live from Las Vegas at the Continuum Navigate Conference. This is Harry, wishing you a good day, and thank you very much for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.